Do you have any particular favourite characters or episodes within this? I mean, the Dance of the Dragons, of course, it sort of forms, in a sense, a core part of the book.
Well, I have a lot of affection for Mushroom.
Oh, Mushroom. Well, say a little bit about Mushroom and link it, if you wouldn't mind, to the process of writing fake history, because this is something that really struck me, that you've done so skillfully with this book. Explain who Mushroom is, maybe.
Well, Mushroom is a dwarf, and but he's not a well-born one like Tyrion. He's a dwarf of lowly birth who's the fool in the court during the events leading up to and during much of the Dance of the Dragons and its aftermath. He's a jester. There were actually a number of jesters in the real Middle Ages. Of course, you've probably seen them in many movies, fools, jesters, as they were called. Some of them were very, very clever men who could do all sorts of witticisms and jokes, who could sing funny songs, who could juggle and ride unicycles and do other colorful things. Some of them were people who were physically deformed, who were dwarfs or hunchbacks or whatever. And some of them were obviously very politically incorrect these days, but some of them were mentally handicapped, mentally retarded. The people of the Middle Ages found that wonderfully amusing. So Mushroom is a dwarf, but he's of the clever sort. He's an observer, and the testimony of Mushroom. This book's not actually written by me. You see, it's written by Archmaester Gildane of the Citadel, and he's writing a history. And like anyone writing a history, he has to go back to primary sources. And I had a lot of fun with that, because when he gets to the Dance of Dragons, he has a number of primary sources, but three of them are most major. He has Grandmaster Orwyle's official court records. He has the Septon, who kept the Sept in King's Landing and the Red Keep, who of course is a religious figure. So he interprets everything as the will of the gods and what was a sin and what wasn't a sin. And he has Mushroom, who was semi-literate and couldn't actually write anything, but who told his story in later years to a equivalent of a monk who wrote it all down. And Mushroom's story, of course, is always the most scandalous, scurrilous, filthy version of events, all of which had to do with people betraying each other and poisoning each other and having similar type fun and sleeping in places they shouldn't sleep and all of that. I love the idea, since this was a fake history, I didn't want to tell it as an omniscient historian setting down, this is what actually happened. I love the idea of telling it as a historian in-world who's trying to figure out what happened, but he's looking back at his primary sources, and he's finding contradictory accounts. You know, and this was impressed on me many, many years ago, long before Game of Thrones began. I was writing a novel that was never completed or published. It was black and white and red all over, a novel about 1890s journalism in New York City, when there were 14 competing daily newspapers. One of which was the New York World, owned and operated by Joseph Pulitzer, the great, great journalist for whom the Pulitzer Prize is named. And the New York World building, which no longer exists, but was down on Park Row, which is where all the newspapers were built, was the tallest building in the world at its time. And it had a golden dome on the top. It was a very memorable building. You know, it was built right next to the Sun, a competing paper, but it was so high that people said Pulitzer could lean out and spit on the Sun if he wanted to spit straight down at the smaller building next to him. The thing is, when I tried to research the world and find out, tallest building in the world, how many stories was it exactly? I found 3 different contradictory citations. It was easy 20 stories tall, or 16, I think, or 15. And that really impressed on me. This is like 1890 I'm looking at. This is like yesterday in comparable things. This is a simple, factual question. How many stories were in this building? And I'm getting 3 different accounts. If they can't even get that right, what's the odds that they know what happened to Charlemagne, 2,000 years ago or something. The odds are astronomical. So a modern historian or someone like Archmaester Gildane has to sort through these stories, these contradictory stories, and decide which he believes and which he doesn't believe. And I had a lot of fun being able to tell, mushrooms accounts, which are probably all turned up to 37, and then the duller accounts. But I didn't have to just stick to the duller accounts. I could give all three, and that was a great deal of fun.
And Gildane's sort of favorite phrase that he comes back to is, I guess we'll never know, after presenting every version of the story in this beautifully sort of prurient but kind of buttoned up.
Now, surely when you're writing your actual histories, you encounter the same problem.
It's exactly the same thing. So you do the same thing. You tell the obviously phony version and go, but that's probably phony. But by that time, you've got the bit about the red hot poker up the arse or whatever.